Imagine this. You walk into your own home on a quiet afternoon, expecting nothing more than the usual silence. The television is off. The curtains are half drawn. The house feels just as it should, safe, familiar, and private. But then, something catches your eye. A small detail out of place. A shadow that doesn't belong. A faint sound, almost too quiet to notice, that makes your heart pause for a second. You try to tell yourself it's nothing. But deep down, you know, something isn't right. It was a Tuesday afternoon. A 17-year-old girl returned from school earlier than expected. The house was supposed to be empty, her parents were still at work, and her younger brother was away at soccer practice. She dropped her bag by the door, slipped off her shoes, and went upstairs to her room like she did every other day. But as she entered, she noticed something. Her desk chair, which she always tucked neatly under her desk, was pulled slightly out. On her nightstand, the book she had been reading the night before was no longer face down, but flipped open to a different page. These were tiny details, small enough to dismiss. Yet together, they created a strange, uneasy feeling. She tried to shake it off. Maybe she had left the chair like that. Maybe she had forgotten about the book. She picked up her phone, lay down on her bed, and started scrolling. Minutes passed. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Then, it came. A sound so faint she almost missed it. A slow, controlled breath. It wasn't her own. It wasn't coming from the hallway either. It was closer, inside her room. Her eyes darted across the space, her heart beginning to pound. The closet door was open just a crack, no more than an inch. She could see the darkness inside, still and heavy. She remembered shutting that door completely that morning. Her throat tightened. She sat up, straining to hear. And then, there it was again. A breath. Low. Careful. As if someone was trying not to be heard. Fear gripped her, but curiosity pushed her forward. She stepped slowly toward the closet, each movement heavy with dread. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She pulled the door open just enough to see inside. At first, she saw only her clothes hanging in neat rows. Shoes lined up on the floor. Boxes stacked on the shelf above. Ordinary things. But then, in the narrow gap between her coats, she saw it. A human eye. Staring back at her. She gasped and stumbled backward, but before she could scream, the closet door burst open. A man she had never seen before lunged toward her, arms outstretched. Adrenaline surged through her. She ran. Out of her bedroom, down the stairs, the sound of heavy footsteps right behind her. Her heart pounded in her ears as she tore through the living room and yanked the front door open. She sprinted into the yard, screaming for help. Neighbors emerged, startled by the noise. The man stopped at the door, glaring at her, before bolting back inside. Moments later, sirens echoed through the street. Someone had already called the police. When officers searched the house, they discovered disturbing evidence. The man had been hiding in the attic, coming down only when the family was away. He had slipped into the girl's room that afternoon, waiting quietly in the closet for night to fall. In his bag, they found rope, duct tape, and a knife. The girl was shaken but safe. She never forgot the look of that eye staring back at her from the darkness. And for weeks after, she refused to sleep in her room alone. If you were in her place, Would you have opened that closet door, or would you have run the moment you heard something? You're home alone with your child on an ordinary afternoon. The house feels safe, the kind of quiet you've grown used to. Then, a knock at the door. You glance out the window and see a man in a delivery uniform, holding a package in his hands. You didn't order anything, but he insists it has your name on it. You want to believe it's harmless, but what if it isn't? What if the person at your door isn't there to deliver something, but to take something away? It was late in the evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A single mother was home with her 6-year-old daughter. The night was calm, just the low hum of a television playing in the background and the distant sound of cars on the main road. Then, a firm knock rattled the front door. She wasn't expecting anyone. She looked through the peephole and saw a man standing there in a delivery uniform. In his hands, he carried a medium-sized brown box. He smiled faintly, lifted the package, and said he had a delivery for her. Confused, she opened the small latch on the door but kept the chain lock in place. She told him she hadn't ordered anything. He insisted she sign for it, saying it was prepaid and addressed directly to her home. Her daughter wandered into the hallway, asking who was at the door. The mother quickly motioned for her to step back. Something about the man's presence made her uneasy. She looked past him toward the street. The van parked at the curb was plain white, no logo, no company markings, no phone number, nothing. Delivery vehicles always had clear labels. This one didn't. Her chest tightened. She told the man she wasn't signing anything until she checked the label. He avoided giving it to her. Instead, he kept pressing her to open the door just enough so he could hand the package inside. Her hand hovered near the lock, torn between politeness and caution. Then, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. 2 men. Walking slowly up her driveway. They weren't dressed as delivery workers. No uniforms, no packages. They moved with careful steps, as though they didn't want to be seen. Her heart pounded. She immediately slammed the door shut and locked it. Through the peephole, she saw the man with the package glance over his shoulder at the 2 men now reaching the porch. The 3 exchanged a quick look, then one of them grabbed the handle and tried to pull it open. The door shook violently against its frame. She screamed for her daughter to hide in the bathroom and grabbed her phone. With trembling hands, she dialed 911. The men pounded on the door, jiggling the knob, pressing their weight against it. The mother leaned with all her strength, pushing back while staying on the line with the emergency dispatcher. For long seconds, it felt as though the door would give way. The dispatcher urged her to stay calm, to stay on the line. Then, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. The men backed away from the door. She watched as they sprinted toward the van, tossing the package aside before jumping inside. The vehicle roared off down the street, headlights disappearing into the dark. Minutes later, police arrived. They examined the package and confirmed it was empty, nothing more than a decoy. The officers explained that similar incidents had been happening in the area. The men were part of a group targeting homes where they believed women were living alone. They used fake uniforms and empty packages to gain trust and access. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, shaken by how close they had come to danger. That night, she checked every lock twice, and for weeks after, she never answered the door unless she recognized the voice on the other side. What would you do in this situation? Would you open the door, or would you trust your instincts and keep it locked? When we think of danger, we often imagine it coming from strangers, people we've never met, people outside our lives. But sometimes, the threat comes from someone who once stood close to us. Someone who once held our trust. Imagine ending a relationship, moving forward with your life, and believing it was over, only to discover that the person you left behind refused to let go. Tonight's story shows us that not all home invasions begin with strangers. Some begin with people we thought we knew. It was the fall semester at a small college town. A 20-year-old student lived with 2 roommates in an off-campus apartment. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, a relationship that had lasted more than a year. The breakup had been messy, filled with arguments and late-night calls. She wanted distance, time to heal, and space to focus on her studies. Her roommates assured her that she had nothing to worry about. The apartment was secure. They were in a busy neighborhood. She tried to believe that. But soon, small things began to unsettle her. Late at night, after everyone else had gone to bed, she started hearing a faint tapping sound on her bedroom window. At first, she dismissed it as branches brushing against the glass, or maybe just the wind. But the sound was steady, deliberate, like a fingertip rapping lightly against the pane. A few days later, she noticed her belongings weren't quite where she had left them. Her hairbrush was on the floor instead of her dresser. A picture frame had been turned slightly. She asked her roommates if they had moved anything, but they laughed it off. "You're just stressed," they told her. "You're imagining things." Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She caught glimpses of movement outside her window, shadows crossing the yard when no one should have been there. Once, she thought she saw a figure standing by the fence, but when she looked again, it was gone. Her friends told her not to overthink it. But the unease grew. One night, long after midnight, she woke suddenly. At first, she didn't know why. Then she felt it. A presence. Someone was in the room. Her eyes adjusted to the dark, and what she saw froze her blood. Her ex-boyfriend was standing over her bed. In his hand was a knife. For a moment, neither of them moved. She stared at him in shock, her body paralyzed with fear. His face was blank, almost calm, but his grip on the knife was tight. Then instinct kicked in. She screamed, a raw, desperate cry that echoed through the apartment. Her roommates jolted awake, rushing into the room. The sight of them startled him, and he backed away. They shouted, throwing whatever they could grab, forcing him toward the door. He stumbled, then turned and bolted, disappearing into the night. The roommates quickly locked every entry point, while one of them dialed 911. The young woman sat shaking, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Police arrived minutes later. They searched the area and found him hiding behind a row of trees near the apartment complex. He was arrested on the spot. Investigators later learned that he had been stalking her for weeks. The tapping on the window, the moved belongings, the strange shadows, those weren't accidents. He had been breaking into the apartment when she wasn't home, slowly testing boundaries, waiting for the right moment. The young woman was safe, but the trauma lingered. She changed apartments soon after, unable to sleep in the same room where she had once opened her eyes to find someone she used to love holding a weapon above her. Would you have ignored the small signs, trusting they were nothing, or would you have acted on your instincts right away? Most of us go to bed believing our homes are safe. We lock the doors, shut the windows, and trust that the walls around us will keep danger out. But what happens when that safety is shattered in the dead of night? Tonight's story takes us inside the home of an elderly couple whose quiet evening turned into a fight for survival. A story that reminds us just how thin the line between peace and terror can be. It was just past midnight in a small, peaceful neighborhood. An elderly couple lay asleep in their bedroom. They had lived in this home for more than 30 years. To them, it wasn't just a house, it was where they had raised their children, celebrated holidays, and built a lifetime of memories. The night was calm. The streets were empty. Inside, their little dog was curled at the foot of their bed. Everything seemed quiet, until a sharp sound pierced the silence. The husband woke first. It was faint, at first, like a faint rattle coming from downstairs. He told himself it was nothing. But then, it came again. A sudden crash. The sound of glass breaking. His heart pounded as he sat up. He reached for his glasses, straining to listen. This wasn't a dream. Someone was inside. He whispered to his wife, telling her to stay in bed. Grabbing the small flashlight he kept on his nightstand, he crept down the hallway. When he reached the top of the stairs, he froze. The kitchen window had been shattered, shards of glass scattered across the floor. And worse, he could see the frame bent, the lock pried open. Someone had forced their way inside. He turned quickly toward the phone in the hallway. But when he lifted it, there was no dial tone. The line was dead. Cut. A cold wave ran through him. Whoever was inside wasn't just breaking in to steal. They had prepared. They had planned. He hurried back to the bedroom and locked the door. His wife was now fully awake, trembling as she asked what was happening. He told her quietly, "We're not alone. Someone's in the house." The dog began to growl low, sensing the tension in the room. The couple quickly moved into the closet, shutting the door behind them. In the dark, they clung to each other, listening. Then came the sound. Heavy footsteps on the wooden floor below. Slow. Careful. Each step echoed louder as the intruder moved from room to room. A drawer opened. Something clattered to the ground. The man was searching. Hunting. Then the footsteps started climbing the stairs. One at a time. Closer. The couple held their breath as the sound grew louder. The floorboards creaked right outside their bedroom. Then the doorknob rattled. And slowly, the door opened. The intruder stepped inside. His shoes thudded against the floor, moving closer to the closet. The dog, unable to hold back any longer, exploded into barking and lunged forward. The sudden attack startled the man. The dog bit into his leg, growling fiercely. The intruder shouted, stumbling backward as he tried to kick the animal off. Those precious seconds gave the husband just enough time to push against the closet door, adding to the chaos. The noise carried through the walls of the house and out into the quiet street beyond. As the struggle continued, headlights flashed outside. Neighbors had heard the noise, the glass shattering, the shouting, the dog barking, and had already called 911. The intruder, panicked by the approaching sirens, bolted. He rushed down the stairs, leaving through the broken window the same way he came in. Moments later, police stormed the house, guns drawn, searching every corner until they confirmed it was safe. The elderly couple was shaken but alive. Their dog had a small injury from the scuffle, but he had saved their lives. Officers told them later that the man was a known burglar who had targeted homes he believed were easy prey. But that night, his plan backfired. The couple never forgot the sound of those footsteps coming closer in the dark. For them, home would never feel quite the same again. If this had happened to you, would you have hidden and waited, or would you have confronted the intruder head-on?